A lot of times, if you can play e4 before they get d4 in, it's pretty good because once they play d4, you always have en passant. So it kind of like locks in this bishop a little bit unless white is willing to, maybe give up that pawn. Attacks the rook. Rook can't come up because I have my bishop. Probably has to go back. So I gained a tempo. I'm still blockading this pawn, and you can see how annoying this is, right? This is what I was talking about from the very beginning. Look at this bishop. It can't come out. It means the rook can't come out, which means white is basically playing the game down these two pieces, which is huge. d4, so we have a Scotch game. Let's go ahead and take it. And I guess we'll just play the main line here, which I don't know a ton of theory, but I think I know enough to get by. So we'll play bishop c5. We're just attacking the knight here. They take, and there's a cool line here. One of the few lines that I know in the Scotch. Instead of taking back right away, you can actually throw in an in-between move. Queen to f6. Very surprising move if you've never seen it before. But essentially what we're saying is we're threatening checkmate, and we're going to take our knight back on the next move after white defends the checkmate. So, for example, let's say white plays queen e2 to defend. Now we can take our knight. If they try to save the knight and stop the checkmate, like by blocking, well, we simply take it. And if you look carefully, there's no other dangerous moves for the knight. Yes, it can go here. Who cares? We have checkmate. Yes, it can go here or here or here. None of these moves are dangerous, right? So that's why we can get away with this in-between move of attacking on f2. And it's actually, if I remember correctly, it causes white to do something awkward. Because how do you deal with this? You either have to put your bishop here and allow us to trade and mess up your pawns. You have to put your queen here, which blocks your bishop in, or you have to put your queen here, which blocks this bishop in. Or maybe you go here and allows me to double up the pawns that way. Maybe you play f3, but then you create all these weaknesses along the dark square. So you can see how very useful move to throw in. This is a good one to remember against the Scotch if they do take you here. And I'm even thinking bishop d7 and castling queenside. One thing that I like about this move is it takes away what might be a natural move for white, bishop c4. So what I'm trying to do here, guys, is kind of think not only what do I want to do, but what is my opponent most likely to do as well, right? Of course, they're going to be wanting to develop their pieces. This bishop doesn't have a lot of places to go. You can't go here or here or here, or you just get captured. So that's one thing. This might be a logical move. If I take that away, where's this bishop going to go? You can't go here. You can't go here. So it's going to cause white to make some very passive developing moves, is what I'm thinking. So I'm going to play bishop to e6. Also, it's a good move anyway, because it brings the option for me to bring my rook over. So all of those, and again, it kind of goes back to what I've said before. If you can accomplish multiple things at the same time, that's probably a really good move. So I'm developing a piece. I'm opening up this for my rook, and I'm taking away this from my opponent. So it's kind of like three things all at the same time, right? So that's probably a little bit better than, let's just say, knight to e7, where I really only accomplish maybe two things. Develop a piece, get ready to castle, but I don't take away this square from my opponent. Of course, you have the obvious captures. White takes back. Now I have to worry about this. I don't really love that because now I'm on the defensive all of a sudden. I would like to find something else if possible. So what are my options? I could drop the bishop back and probably get this weird pawn cube, which would be fine. Pawn cubes are actually not bad because they control a lot of squares and everything's kind of defended. But I'm also kind of just scanning, like, what if I play bishop d4? And maybe if white takes me, I could capture with the rook and bam, double up my rooks. That's pretty powerful. That can open up some tactical opportunities. So that's something that I'm thinking through. I mean, I could even go here and just attack this, maybe make white retreat, another option. I kind of liked the way that looked, bishop d4 and doubling up my rooks. So I'll go ahead and go there. And notice how instead of trading and then having to go on the defensive, which I could have done, I could have played king b8 and the game would have went on. I'm trying to look for opportunities to keep up the tempo, keep the ball in my court where I'm the one making the threats, right? So by going here, I'm attacking. I'm threatening to just take this guy. And if white takes me, bam, I'm the one who's getting ready to bring in another piece and to keep the pressure up. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, b5 doesn't stop us, so we're going to continue on here. Knight to e5 with the double attack, and black now is basically forced to take us. Brings us a little bit closer to the end game where we will have an advantage because of our extra pieces. Okay, so they didn't want to take, and so I will just take the free piece. I also have a fork, but you want to ask yourself, what's the point value situation going to be? So for example, if I take this, oh, they resigned. All right. If I take this, 3 points. What if I go here and get a fork? Well, let's just say the rook moves. I take this, they take me. I get 5, but I lose 3. I only get a 2-point net advantage. So I think a lot of players would be tempted. Oh, there's a fork, I get a rook. But really, it just makes more sense to take the knight. You get 3 points as opposed to only 2 points. It's basic math, right? So knight to d7. So the idea here is that black wants to play a6 and keep the bishop pair. So that's a pretty strong move. But what I like to do is play d4. And when I play d4, I'm going to recapture with the queen. Now, normally I wouldn't do this because a knight might hop out to c6 and chase my queen away. But notice where the knight has been moved to. So there is no knight that can go to c6. So queen takes d4 makes a lot more sense. Okay, by the way, if you're wondering about this fork, there's always going to be knight to c3 in this position, which blocks the check from the queen and defends the bishop at the same time. So black can't actually win a piece. All right, so since I can't remember, I'm going to just go with the solid move. Okay, is this a Stafford Gambit? Yeah. So rather than accept this and go into something that maybe my opponent has studied or knows more about than I do, which very well could be true since I don't know much about the Stafford Gambit, I'm just going to look for a solid move to play here. And I could just retreat and allow black to recapture, but I think what I'll do instead is play the move d4. And I'm just trying to play a good solid move that controls the center and lets my pieces out right away. I'm also trying to play a move that I don't believe is the main line. And this is especially important when you're playing somebody who's evenly matched with you, like your similar skill level. If you play into an opening that they know really, really well, and you don't know that well, you're setting yourself up to have a difficult game. So like clearly my opponent wants to play the Stafford Gambit. So rather than just, all right, let's just play the most obvious move, take the knight and see what happens, I'm going to play something a bit weird. And you see they pause a little bit here. They probably are like, what's this d4 move? And now we're kind of just playing a normal game of chess again, right? Which is really what you want to try to do, okay? Just trying to think, what do I want to do? Let's go ahead and put the knight here. It's kind of a flexible move. Doesn't like commit to too much. I could still strike with e5. I could still expand over here. I could still just kind of develop my pieces if I want. One of the things that happens a lot of times in these King's Indian type of setups is sometimes the bishop just has to wait. Just have to be patient for this guy, right? Because you can see there's not really a good place for me to develop it to. And that's okay. That happens sometimes. All right, let's see. Go ahead and put my queen on c7. Kind of just gets out of any pins here. Supports if we want to play e5. And a lot of times when you play this kind of setup, you're just sort of waiting. You're just you're not trying to make anything happen right away. You're playing very patiently and just slowly improve your position little by little. And at some point when you think it's a good time, you'll strike back at the center. So, just kind of keep an eye on all of these moves. And when you think it's the right time, you can push forward. Of course, keep an eye on what happens if white pushes forward as well. But usually your position is so solid that you're going to have some response. And then I might play like b6. Ooh, c4. I wasn't expecting that move. Okay. What I'm wondering is, can I just take it? If the queen takes, we can trade, and then I can win my piece back. So I'm essentially winning a pawn. I'm already up 1 pawn, so I'd be up 2 pawns. I'd go into an endgame up 2 pawns. That seems pretty good. The other option is if the knight takes, again, I could take here either way, win back my piece, and so I am essentially winning a pawn just by capturing that. I could also just retreat, but why would I retreat when I can win a pawn? So just making sure there's not like any crazy in-between moves that I missed. I don't think so. This is super common in the King's Indian. You always want to be scanning for opportunities to use your bishop in a tactic like this, right? So we sacrifice the piece, but it unleashes the bishop. We're going to get it right back a few moves later, and essentially we win a pawn. All right, super common idea in these King's Indian types of games. Okay, so there we lost our piece, but like I mentioned, now we can take this one. So I don't think I want to trade that bishop. I think I'd rather just take with the pawn and keep this guy here because it sort of defends my king. And so I'm happy to take this way. So yeah, bishop d7 looks like a very logical move to me. Ah, what about e6? Remember I was telling you guys about e6? Now it's different. If I take this, check, I still win a pawn. Then my king is on d7. Am I okay with that? Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. It's actually pretty safe on d7 because the center is locked up. There's no open files, you know, for pieces to get through. So I think we'd be okay. All right, so we've made the queen go back, and now it looks like we can take this pawn for free. Now, before I take it, I'm going to make sure I'm not getting myself into trouble because I'm putting myself into a pin. So what I want to ask myself is, how is white going to follow up and attack my knight in that situation? Knight to f3 is the obvious move. I would simply take it with check, which is important. I don't lose my queen, and then I would have time to move my queen after that, and I'm up a pawn. So that looks pretty fine. The other move might be like queen e2 or queen h5, both of which attack my knight. So how am I dealing with that? And on either one, I think I would take here again with check, and whatever happens, then I would follow up and take the bishop because it's undefended. So in both of those situations, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's fine. So I am going to take the pawn. But you got to be careful before you take pawns like this to put yourself in a pin. You have to make sure your opponent doesn't have a good follow-up. Okay, what are they doing? They're defending their bishop. That's actually a very good move because now all those tactics where I can like sacrifice my knight with check, they don't work anymore because I don't have that follow-up capture on the bishop. So that's a pretty good move. I'm trying to trade. I'm also trying to just activate my pieces, and I don't want to spend a lot of time. So I'm trying to avoid like super complicated, tricky lines. I'm looking for like simple ways to simplify, and lucky for us, our opponent blunders the rook. Classic example of you're trying to flag your opponent and you don't take time to make a good move. The best way to flag your opponent, guys, by the way, flag your opponent means make them run out of time. The best way to flag your opponent is to play good moves because they're going to have to think to play good moves as well. If you just try to play quickly, if they're not good moves like we just saw, the game is very easy for me. Even though I only have a minute, it's super easy for me. Look at this. I'm about to get another queen, and white can basically resign now. So whenever I see a knight jump forward, I always want to ask myself the question, what happens if I attack it? And in this case, it looks like knight to a6 is the only move. Would I be willing to give up my bishop for that knight? And I think I might be because it messes up the pawn structure. And so that's definitely something I'm considering. Also, because I've positioned my pawns on light squares, this bishop doesn't really have like a great place to go at the moment, right? Like I can go here, 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 but I'm not really going to be doing much. And so maybe that does make sense. Get rid of this knight, trade off that bishop, and continue developing and go on with the game with a kind of a permanent pawn structure weakness. So I think I am going to do that. Go ahead and take the knight. You know, one of the things I always talk about, develop your pieces as quickly as you can. This is a unique position in that the center is locked up. So what that means is it slows down the pace of the game. So super quick, speedy development is not necessarily the top priority in the position, right? So that's a very big difference is, you know, if this pawn was still here and maybe these got traded and the center is starting to get opened up, I would be much more likely to prioritize developing my knight and castling. But because it's locked up, I'm okay, you know, slowing that down a little bit. I'm not going to delay, you know, developing forever, but I will throw in a move like this and attack a pawn if I think it makes sense. All right, but now that it's been defended, I will continue with the development. I'm expecting queen to take, yep. And now I think knight to c3. So there's an important thing. When you have a backward pawn to attack, you have to make sure that it can't move forward and just trade itself off. So for example, if I just play a random move here like, I don't know, king h1, and black is able to play d5, and I take and they take. They've just traded off that pawn. It's no longer a weakness. Now their bishop can come out, and all of a sudden, black's position is looking pretty nice. So I'm going to be very careful about my next move here, and I think I'm going to either play rook over, or what I'm leaning towards is knight to c3. And the reason is I'm adding a defender to that square so that if they try to play d5, I'm just going to be able to take it now because I have enough defenders, right? So that's kind of important. And another thing that I might do here is after I bring my rook over is I might actually move my knight to d5, which is another way of blockading it. And if the knight takes, I'm going to recapture with the queen. And if the queen takes, I'm going to recapture with the rook. The point is you have to leave that file open, so I wouldn't want to recapture with the pawn. You have to leave that file open so that your rooks can constantly put pressure on the weak pawn, okay? So to win at 1,000 and 1,100, you have to play the game without making those big mistakes and being able to capitalize on when your opponent makes those mistakes. And if you can do that, you're going to get past 1,000 without any problems. All right. Opponent makes a questionable decision to bring out the queen early. We take advantage of that by allowing this capture. Okay, attack the queen. And here, instead of knight c3, the computer wanted to move bishop to f1. And the reason is incredible. Watch this, guys. Watch this. Bishop to f1 attacks the queen. Let's look carefully. Where can the queen move to? You can't take the pawn. You can't go here because the knight. You can't go here, here, or here because the rook. You can't take this because the queen. You can't go here because the pawn. You can't go here because the bishop. So you only have one move with your queen right here. Only square. Okay. So you go there and then bam, rook to g5. Let's look again. Can't go here. Can't take that. You can't go here or here because the rook. You can't take this. You can't go here. You have to go to here. Only move. h6. And bam, rook to f5. Unleashes the bishop. Where does the queen go? Well, you can't go here or here or here or here. Only move. Queen to g6. When I say only move, of course, black could decide to just trade the queen for the rook and the bishop, but then you're losing your queen. So only move to save the queen. Queen to g6. Knight to e5, leaving the rook sitting here, going for that queen. You can see the possibilities that open up here because that queen is a target. It's a high-value target. All these moves wouldn't be possible otherwise, but they are. Again, where does the queen move to? You can't go there, you can't go there, you can't go there, you can't go there, you can't go there. You have to go to g1. Okay. Rook to g5. Keep attacking it. Now I can go here in the corner or I can take the pawn. What happens if it actually just goes in the corner? Ah, then you play knight to f3. Look at this. This is so funny. And next move you play rook g1. There's nothing black can do to stop you. Bam. Queen is trapped. That's incredible. Okay, but the other option is you could take the pawn. But then rook h5. Okay, where's the queen going to go? Only move. Queen to g1. Queen to f3. And you're going to trap the queen next move. There's nothing the queen can do because you can't go here. You can't go here. You can't go here. Look at these pieces. Sorry, look at these pieces. Wow, that is incredible. So black does something and then bam, rook h1. Queen is trapped. 8 moves later. That's incredible. That's incredible. Of course, I didn't see all that. But it just goes to show you, even as early as move, what move is this? Bishop f1 would have been played on move 6. As early as move 6, we have a forced queen trap. That's insane. But it goes to show you just can't play chess this way. You just can't do it. Okay, so they do capture, and you can see here, it's good that we have the knight here. Otherwise, this pawn would be, we would potentially lose the pawn. So I'm going to take this way because it opens up my queen along the d file and also lets out my bishop right away. So a lot of times there's a rule in chess where you want to capture towards the center. It's good to bring pawns towards the center. I think this is one exception to that rule where when you're trying to complete your development quickly, you want to let that bishop out. So here we have an interesting decision. We can take with the knight right away and just leave the tension between the queens, or we can just trade. So I want to take advantage of the pin, and that's what I'm trying to think through. If I take with the knight, I believe white has the option to simply trade, And then they could just take my knight, which looks like I just lose a piece. So I can't do that. So I think I do have to take this way and then take, and then we'll have the pin on that rook. So if we lose our knight, we'll get a rook, which is a good trade. I think that's the way to go. I guess I could also just like castle and leave that to maybe capture later, but I don't think I'm going to do that. Yeah, I think I am going to go ahead and trade the queens. So here we go. And like I said, I just want to take advantage of the pin. This looks like the best way to do it. So knight takes here, I believe, is the move. And white has to deal with this threat. And it's not that easy to do because if you play knight here, what I'm thinking about doing is actually castling queenside. And now I have another pin on that knight. And white is starting to get all jammed up here. Okay, well, they just go for this, which looks like it just loses in exchange right away. So there we go. We'll take that. And we... So here's an example of where it might be a mistake to go pawn hunting. So if I grab this, what's white most likely going to do? Probably rook to e1, lining up on my king and my bishop. And if I move my bishop, they now have a discovered attack with the knight, which could get very dangerous and I could lose a rook. So definitely not worth it to capture a pawn in that situation. So I think I am going to play f6, make that knight move. Not sure where it would go to, maybe here, or here. And then castle queenside, which would defend my pawn and activate my rook. I really like the look of that. I don't see any moves for white that would really concern me. So let's go ahead and play f6. You know, if you have an opportunity to chase away a very powerful knight that's just sitting in the center of the board, why not go ahead and do it, right? That's kind of my mindset here. This move doesn't really create any weaknesses for me. You know, normally the diagonal here and here, but in this case, does white have a bishop that can control those squares? No. The queens are gone, so there's really no problem with me playing that move. We could go to d3 or d4. So the nice thing about d3 is it kind of shuts down this bishop. Also, it's not really a target because it's defended very nicely by a pawn. If I go to d4, it's more aggressive. I get more space, get more of a clamp here. But then sometimes this pawn actually can become a target for black. And also it allows this bishop to just kind of stay there. So both have their merits. I think what I will do is actually just play rook to e1 and see what black's going to do, and then make that decision on where I want the pawn to go. Okay, so now, since I can play d4 with a tempo, I like the look of that right away. So, you know, again, when you can do two things at the same time, it's usually a good idea. So I wanted to move this pawn somewhere anyway. The fact that I can do this one and gain a tempo on the bishop, basically like a free move. Black can't castle, black can't develop a knight or make a threat. They have to spend a move retreating the bishop, which I'm pretty happy to see. Here's kind of a common idea. A lot of players will go for this line where they maybe lose a piece, but they get a rook. But what you have to understand is if you lose a bishop and your knight is trapped, you're probably going to lose the knight too. So you're actually losing a knight and a bishop for a rook, which is not a good trade for white. So I don't think white should have gone for that route because of that. And on top of that, I'm getting like a free queen move here to like line up and attack some stuff. And I'm able to capture with this pawn and sort of solidify everything. So I don't think this was the right approach from white. Queen here, threatening checkmate, but black can deal with that relatively easily with like queen f6. So maybe it's just not the best to do that. I don't actually know. I don't know. When in doubt, I'm just gonna castle because this can't really be a bad move. I'm getting my king out of the center before I start looking at, you know, opening things up. Queen to f3. So whenever you see queens, or really any pieces, but anything lined up with your queen, you want to make sure you're paying attention. So for example, knight to f6 check is a tactic where I would lose my queen. I have to take it back, and then my queen gets captured. So, how do we deal with that? Probably defending my queen is the simplest thing. So bishop e6 is what I'm thinking. I mean, I can also move the queen away. right here, counterattacking the queen, I don't believe works because white still is going to play knight here. And when I take, they're going to take my queen and also save their queen at the same time. I do have to be careful. What I'm thinking of here is a couple things. Number one, chasing this knight away. It's a nice centralized knight. I think I can easily chase it away with a move like f5. I'm also thinking about a move like queen d3. Now, why do I want to play queen d3? Well, like I mentioned, these pieces can't really get developed easily. And that's because this pawn is in the way. As soon as this pawn moves forward, let's just say, then the bishop can come out, then the knight can come out, and all of a sudden white's problems are kind of fixed. Now they can't play there right away unless they're willing to gambit the pawn. But even that might be better for white. So I'm thinking queen d3 just to shut that down. I think I am going to go for queen to d3. And just try to prevent white from developing these pieces. Okay, so yeah, again, same kind of thing. Black needed to like finish their development, get their king safe, and they're worried about, these moves, or maybe they wanted to play b5, and you just, in these super aggressive gambit type games, open positions where everybody's kind of developing quickly and threatening stuff, a lot of times you just don't have time to play moves like this. You just don't have time. And that's, I think, what we saw here. So one thing I like to do when my opponent is thinking is just kind of think about general ideas and plans. So like, where might I like to develop my pieces to? What are some things about the position that I want to pay attention to? That kind of stuff. Queen and bishop. Okay, they go rook here, but interesting. It is defended. But after check, they're going to have to block with the knight. And I think I see... Okay, a couple things. I don't have to go here. But if I do, knight to f8, I was thinking of playing g4. Chase the knight away and I win the rook. The issue is after g4, they can throw in this rook move. I have to move my queen. Queen's a little bit trapped. Although, if I don't want to do that, I could just go to h6. The nice thing about going to h6 is that then I'm threatening g4, which traps the knight and potentially wins the... Yeah, maybe that's just better. Only because sometimes if your queen gets trapped over there, it's actually bad because you can't do anything. You almost think like, oh, it's close to the king, I'm attacking a bunch of stuff. But if it's stuck and everything's well defended, you're basically playing without your queen. So I don't really want that to happen. So I think what I will do is just go to h6 because of that. But what I was saying earlier was like when you create this queen bishop battery super early and come down here and trade off the bishop, a lot of times it kind of takes black out of their comfort zone. Like when you play these setups, you're kind of familiar with the bishop sitting there and you kind of know what to do. You bring your knight and maybe you castle and you play like e5 or c5 and you kind of get familiar. But the way that I played it, I think maybe took black out of their comfort zone, and we kind of saw that when they played rook g8, which I don't think was the best approach, right? And so another benefit to playing this kind of weird system, you can catch your opponents off guard. I think I will do that. And, these moves with tempo are very important, right? Because it doesn't give black time to launch an attack. Like I mentioned, right? They have to deal with the threat on their queen. And so as long as you're making threats, a lot of times those are safer moves to make than, I don't know, if I were to just randomly play king b1 or, a3 or some of these moves, it's like that doesn't do anything. Black can basically do whatever they want. When I play knight to d4, they have to move their queen or maybe counterattack my queen somehow, but probably they have to move the queen. Okay. So here, if they castle, they castle. It's fine. I can move my queen. Yeah, somewhere like back here. Like, let's go like this. The reason I want to move it is I don't want to leave it in a discovered, I don't want to leave black a discovered attack on my queen where they can move this knight wherever they want. That's dangerous. Not that they really had a good move, but I don't even want to give them that option. So that's why we go back right away. The tactic right here that I did miss was knight to c6. Yep. because the rook is undefended. So even though I lose a knight, I can invade with my rook. So that would have been a nice move. Didn't see that one, but like I said, in the time situation, I don't feel bad about this, right? Playing a move like this quickly, that's a good solid move that doesn't put your position at risk, I think is a good time management choice. And also I did see a nice follow-up, which was going to be very difficult for, black to deal with. And this is going to be the Danish Gambit. Now, of course, you can accept this, but usually white will play bishop c4, and then they'll take back. And what happens is you just have to be super careful. And so what I like to do instead of accepting the Gambit usually is just play d5. This is kind of a pretty common principle. If your opponent plays the move c3, d5 is usually a pretty good idea, because a lot of times the problem with d5 is that they take, you take, and your queen gets attacked. But when their pawn's on c3, they can't go there, right? So if this were to happen, I would just simply take. So that's why I like to play d5. Now this capture here allows me to simply take on e4, which I think I will just go ahead and do that. Just get rid of, white's center there. And yeah, they can attack it, but I can simply defend with my knight. And I think we're doing okay already. So I believe that's a mistake, and we can just win a pawn here. Now, there is one thing that I'm thinking through here is right now this bishop is stuck. It's not a very good bishop for white. As soon as I take this, then this bishop now can come out, and it also opens up the e-file, and I have not castled. So it's a little bit risky to do this. Now, the other thing is I'm also going to get some pressure on this knight, which is kind of nice. Because if I'm able to, let's just say bishop e2, for example, and I can just trade off a bunch of stuff, so like takes and takes and takes, after I get my pawn, then I could play e6, bring my bishop out castle, and I think I would be fine. But I just want to, point out, you have to be careful just grabbing pawns like this, even if they're free pawns, which this one looks like it is, because if I get attacked and checkmate, it doesn't matter that I got an extra pawn, right?